Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the Masters of Cinema Marathon. In this video we're going to be talking about and discussing the 1973 film. Is it 1973? Let me just double check that to be absolutely sure. Yes, 1973 film La Planète Sauvage, or Fantastic Planet. This is a French animation. The director, René Laloux, is French, but it was made in the Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia. Will it say on the back? The Czech Republic, and also in Paris. And there was a very long and troubled history of putting this film together, getting this film made. There was the invasion in the Czech Republic that kind of put a halt to the film for many, many years, and so it was very, very troubled and long, arduous production making this film. And I have talked about this film before. I reviewed it for the Epic Film Challenge 2, 1,001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. And so I haven't gone back to check that review to see what I said about the film. And it's so long ago now, a couple of years, that I've forgotten what I would have said. So I've rewatched the film specifically for this video, and I'm just really intrigued to go back now and see what I said about it 2 years ago to see if it matches up with how I feel now. All I know is that I rated it on Letterboxd at 5 out of 5. I thought that much about this film when I first saw it. Now I'd give it 4.5 out of 5. So I guess that my opinion on the film has dulled just a tiny bit, but I think that there is still an essence retained in the second viewing of this film that is really something to behold. And before I even get into it, a little personal kind of story to add in about this viewing, the second viewing for me of Fantastic Planet, is when I sat down to watch this yesterday, and Connie was sat next to me, and she'd seen me watch this the first time 2 years ago, and she was like, "Oh, that looks weird. Why are you watching that?" Well, it's in the book. And this time she said, "Oh, wait, it's that weird film again." And she's like, "Why are you watching this?" And I'm like, "Because I want to talk about it in a video, and I want to refresh my memory." And she's like, "Yeah, but isn't that like a once in every 10, 15 years kind of film?" And I was like, "Well, maybe for you, but not for me." I was quite, I mean, maybe it's not the one film that I wanted to see over any other film tonight, but it's one I was eager to revisit and to kind of recapture, hopefully, some of the feelings I got when I first saw it. And when I first saw it, I was really struck by how different and unique and free this film feels. So again, French animated, and I watched it again in the French language. There is an American USA dub track available on this Blu-ray, and the me from 2 years ago would want to watch that version as well just to get the full context of this release, but I decided against it. I flicked through some of the American dub and it just didn't feel right to me. There's something about the French language that's so poetic, and you know, the fact that I can't understand it, it is an alien language to me, only lends itself even more perfectly to a story about an alien planet. So the story of La Planète Sauvage, which I believe more kind of translates to the Savage Planet more than it does Fantastic. But I think Fantastic Planet was an American affectation, or you know, to kind of release it in America and to give it more of a kind of feeling of you know, ooh, sci-fi animation, not like Savage Planet. It makes it sound a bit harsher than Fantastic Planet, but Savage Planet would be a more appropriate fitting title for the film, because it is a savage you know, story and tale told through this unique style of, I don't want to say animation, but more art style. I don't know, I can't really put nice words together to kind of convey what I mean, but basically, if we break it down in terms of how animation usually works, the way that you see an animated film, and again, I'm no expert on animation, so if anyone is, you know, you'll probably be just rolling your eyes and slapping your forehead, but in very broad terms, I would say that animation, you have these beautiful painted backgrounds, and then you have the foreground elements, the characters that move and the objects that they interplay with, and those things are drawn and animated frame by frame, and so you can always tell like the background from the foreground, and the backgrounds usually look fantastic. In La Planète Sauvage, everything looks like the background art, but it's a very sparse art style as well. And René Laloux worked with a guy called Roland Topor, I believe, and he has a very distinctive art style, and he kind of was going to work on this film and wrote the film with Laloux, but eventually kind of left the production and said, it literally said, my mum doesn't think I should do this film, so I'm not going to. So Laloux was very upset. And I quote, I went into a white rage about it, he said. He wanted to do this film with Topor, but ended up just kind of consulting on it with the art style and things like that. But it is a very distinctive art style. There's a sparseness to it. The locations on this alien world, they're very kind of abstract at times. And so, it's not something where it's just amazing, beautiful stuff traditionally. But to me, I find the weirdness beautiful. I find the strangeness and the uniqueness. I'm just using the same old tired words of the setting to be so captivating and again beautiful. But it's not what you would typically expect if you haven't seen the film. Trying to kind of illustrate in your mind what this film is like if you haven't seen it would be very difficult, I think. But nevertheless, it is set on an alien planet, and you do get some setup in the story about like what the planet is and some of the background of the alien creatures called the Drogs. But you really have to pay attention to keep up with all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of names and alien kind of terms for things like cities and so on. There's also a moon that is, a satellite to the planet where the alien Drogs live, and that's the Savage Planet, La Planète Sauvage. And they talk about how, it's a very mysterious kind of location that eventually becomes the driving point of the third act of the film, I think, is getting to the Savage Planet. But we have the Drogs, who are these blue alien creatures, and we have humans called Oms. And so we see human beings from the perspective of these alien Drogs. And the Drogs, they're very spiritual and, how do I put this? It's very, very difficult to explain. They're very spiritual, but they're into meditation. They use their minds a lot. I can't think of a word to describe that very eloquently, but their whole lives actually revolve around meditation. They sit down and they meditate, and the kind of the pupils of their eyes disappear, which gives them a very haunting look in the film. And then their kind of essence floats off in an orb somewhere, and the orb kind of goes around the world, and it's very mysterious. But they view humans, who to Drogs, a human is almost like an ant, and they view them as just these pests or these pets. They tame some of them just like you would a cat or a dog, and they make them do tricks, and they dress them in funny clown outfits and things like that, and they toy around with them, or they stamp on them and they kill them. And it's a very allegorical film in that sense. You can easily look at this and draw parallels to racism in some cases, but more particularly, I think, is the way that we treat animals. I think that's kind of a real big issue that is being cross-referenced, I suppose, through the allegorical meaning of the humans placed down in the role of pets or pests, and how they try to de-om certain areas, and they'll go in and exterminate the oms and kill them. And sometimes they have fun in kind of keeping them as pets, but they grow tired of them, and they hold these meetings and talk about perhaps these oms are smarter than we think. From where we found them, there was evidence that they actually knew how to build things, and you see these images of half a train track or something, which is really cool. The story is really interesting, always grabbed my attention. And at the beginning we focus on a character called Tiwa, and she's a young Drog who finds a young infant Om, this little baby, and it's a shocking introduction to the film where we see this human woman running with her infant child in her arms, and this big blue hand comes down and just nudges it down the hill, and she goes flying, tumbling down the hill, and it just keeps playing around with her, and then it picks her up and just drops her from like 50 foot, and she dies in front of her infant child. And it is just, it's shocking, you know. And to kind of go back to what I was saying about the animation style or the art style, is that everything looks like a painting, or it looks like everything is kind of the same quality as far as the art style goes. And Lalu was talking about that in the documentary on the Blu-ray, about how to him you see most kind of like American animated films, they value the animation over the actual artwork style. So often the character designs maybe might suffer in lieu of really smooth and nice animation. But to him, he'll go for kind of the quality of how everything looks, and the animation will suffer, meaning the motion will suffer. And so there is clunkiness there, especially, you know, in this film. I could definitely say the animation is in the moving parts aren't that impressive. But that's really not what it's about. And the lack of movement at times only lends itself even better to the kind of the surreal feeling the film gives off, you know. So you have a character kind of look up to the camera like this, and it's like 3 frames, 3 different paintings, I suppose, or 3 different drawings. And so it's a very kind of slow, methodical thing, but you get like a dreamy feeling from it, I think. I don't know, I really enjoyed the kind of almost clunkiness of it. But even then, at the very beginning, when the woman gets kind of flicked down the hill, the way her body moves, the anatomy is very well drawn, but it's clunky at the same time, the way that it tumbles over, because it's just really interesting. I can't even describe it. You have to see it for yourself, and if you've seen it, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. I think there's some elements of perspective here and there in the film that aren't quite as refined, where I can tell like that isn't quite perfectly put together, you know. But that is fine, because I think the film is so surreal, and I'm just going to keep rolling back around to these words, surreal and abstract. And so much of this film is abstract. We'll have these little interludes of just alien creatures every now and again, just doing these weird things. This one that stood out to me so much the first time I watched it was this weird little like laughing alien plant thing that just sits inside this kind of caged flower, laughing really creepily, and he has a little kind of swatter that he reaches out and he kind of pulls in other aliens, little flying bugs, and just rattles it until they're dead, and then drops on the floor and just continues laughing. And then our characters will walk across the screen, so it kind of links into where the characters are going. So this is a really all over the place review, but as I said at the beginning, we have Tiwa, a teenage, I suppose, drag, and she finds the young boy at the beginning of the film, the little baby, and asks her parents if she can keep this as a pet. So she does, and because the drag life cycle is so different, and I suppose because of their size perhaps as well, for them a week is like a year to an So the young who she names Ter, he grows up very quickly. So he's about, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 by the time he decides to leave. You know, he's very kind of upset and what's the word, unhappy in his situation. You know, he knows he's being treated as a pet, he's being treated as a plaything, and you know, we kind of see that in these little episodic moments where he'll be kind of just toyed around with and almost abused in a way. I mean, she loves him, but you know, at the same time, he's at kind of the mercy of how she feels like playing with him. It could be something where it hurts him, and she'll just go along with it. But she has this headband that she wears, and it kind of teaches her everything she needs to know. In lieu of school, the Drags have this kind of again, I'm trying to think of the term to use here, because it's something that doesn't exist. You know, it's science fiction, but it's like a telepathic means of learning things. So she'll put on like a headband, and we'll see like inside her head the things that she's being taught through this kind of drag learning system. And the young boy, the Ter, he kind of sits in her hand while she's doing this, and he ends up kind of retaining all this knowledge that she is getting. So when he decides to flee, he takes that headband with him, and he finds these wild and he tells them that he knows the drag language, he can read it, can give them information, give them knowledge, but also they can learn it for themselves. And so then the second act of the film is about him kind of integrating himself into the wild society. And then the third act is about kind of the Drags realizing that the Oms are a bit more intelligent than they first thought, and they try to wipe them out, basically. And it kind of builds from there until we get to the kind of grand climax and finale of the film, which I feel does wrap itself up just a bit too neatly and quickly. And I believe that the animators and the artists in the Czech Republic kind of said, we're done on the film, and they kind of quit. So apparently there were 4 scenes that weren't finished, from what I understand, from the making of documentary. So perhaps that kind of explains why there's a little bit of a, and then this happened, then the end. Like, it very quickly kind of, I don't feel wanting for kind of more, but I feel like the information we got at the end could have been expanded on just a few more minutes to kind of show some of the things that are being talked about. But regardless, it's an abstract kind of film, both in the way that the Drags kind of meditate and kind of sit there and use their minds to kind of literally meld with each other at times. There's a scene where 4 adult Drags are just sitting there and their bodies are just changing to multicolors, and just, again, the only word I can think of is abstract. And so the other thing I think that maybe the film suffers from just a tiny bit is the lack of character development, in terms of, like, we have this main character, Ter, who is, our character we're following through this whole journey of being born. We don't see him physically getting born, but we see him as a young baby, seeing his mother, get killed in front of his very eyes, growing up as a pet to these alien creatures, then breaking off onto his own, kind of becoming a man. The years go on, and then he kind of leads this revolution. But there isn't much to his character, which makes sense in a way, because he hasn't really had a proper life, but he kind of gets thrown to the wayside at some points in the third act of the film, where he's not really focused on very much. And then I just feel like more of a through line on his character probably would have made the film even better. But really, this film is more of a feeling than it is, let's break down the story into 3 acts and character development. It's more about just the weirdness of it, and being taken on a ride, being taken on a trip. And speaking of being taken on a trip, I think that one thing that really dates the film, and I think it's kind of a shame because it really does date the film. And I feel if the score was different, even though I wouldn't change it, I do love the score. I feel with a different score, this film could really be timeless, and it could be just enjoyed by anybody, and wouldn't feel kind of set in one place as far as the context of when the film was made, because it absolutely feels like a 70s movie, and it is absolutely a 70s infused soundtrack. It is psychedelic, it has the feeling of early Pink Floyd at times, the soundtrack, and so instantly you kind of time-stamped 70s movie, and so that kind of takes just a tiny bit away from the timelessness of this completely wild fantasy science fiction story that has great allegorical weight to it, I feel. But I do love the score. It's very repetitive, but there's a real kind of sense of melancholy to it as well, especially towards the end. I really do love the score, but it absolutely dates the film, and I feel like it would be nice if it didn't do that, but it is what it is, and I kind of like it all the same, and it definitely fits the abstract tone of the film as far as the visuals go, with this kind of psychedelic music going on. And so I love the film, I really, really do, and it's an hour and 12 minutes, so it just breezes by. Wish it was a little longer, wish it had a bit more weight to some of the character development, because it would just make it better, I think. And give there's like an old woman who's part of the more wild kind of group in this certain park area where a lot of the second act takes place, and she has kind of a scene towards the end where she's very old and she can't continue on, and it's made out to be this very emotional thing, but you never really spend too much time with her. But at the same time, it's almost, you have to fill in the blanks for yourself a lot with this film, and I'm okay with doing that. I'm okay with not seeing a lot of the kind of in-between parts, and kind of just, again, you have to use your imagination a little bit, even to the point where I look at it as like a storybook that you would read when you were a kid, and you see this gorgeous artwork and things like that, and then you would have to kind of fill in the blanks a little bit. And again, as I was saying, with the Savage Planet being more of a suitable title than Fantastic Planet, this is a brutal film. There are some kind of moments that are quite adult, not overly so. I'm not sure what it's rated. PG, okay, contains moderate fantasy, violence, and natural nudity. There's a lot of nudity in the film, but there's a sequence where this alien creature lands on the tree and starts kind of eating the humans, the Oms, and so they take it down and then they kind of stab it and then they're kind of drinking the blood and bathing in the blood. It gets quite brutal at times. Even there's a sequence where he's basically challenged to fight one of the Oms to kind of keep his place in their community, and it's a brutal fight where blood is shed and people are killed. So. There's a sense of brutality to the film for sure, and the finale is an interesting one. Again, I feel like it's just a teeny bit too rushed at the end, although I can understand why. But overall, I think it is a fantastic film, and I really do. I think animation is something that's greatly underrated, and a lot of times, in a lot of places, it's written off as kind of, kid stuff, children stuff. And while it can be that and also be something adult at the same time, you have films like this which are purely, it's an adult kind of movie. Not in that sense, but in the sense that it's for grown-ups. It's for, people who can kind of watch films like this and get something deep out of them. And it's a film that is so abstract that I do get things out of it that maybe an average film goer wouldn't. You look at Connie, she looks at it and she's like, oh, it's so weird. I really would like to sit Connie down and watch this properly and see if she actually did come around on it, because looking at it on the surface, it's just a weird fucking film. It just looks strange, sounds strange. The sound effects, it's very just odd. Odd is the perfect short descriptor for La Planète Sauvage, I think. So I'm actually going to split this discussion into two parts. So you're actually going to see another massive cinema marathon video on this Blu-ray release, because there are, I think that I can count them on the back here, 5 short films from René Laloux included in the bonus material of this release. So instead of kind of cramming all of that into this singular video and making it overly long, I'm going to do another 0.5 episode. So there will be episode 6.5 coming directly after this one, in which I will review the 5 short films included on the Blu-ray and also talking about the other special features on the Blu-ray and the booklet, and kind of rounding off my thoughts on the entire release. So this video is purely just about the film, but it's a really nice Blu-ray. It looks really good. I know Criterion recently released it, I think 2 years ago, and I think that was from like a 2K scan, so it might look even better than this one. Haven't really looked into that. I probably would like to get that at some point if the quality is significant enough to upgrade. But I'm really happy with this. I think it's a phenomenal film. Really, really, really do. It's my kind of weird, I think I must have mentioned this before. I get a real sense of Hayao Miyazaki from this. Not in his kind of Spirited Away, kind of Ponyo style, but in his more like Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind style, like the weird bugs. Although his bugs are more rooted in reality in a sense. You can kind of take the Omu in Nausicaa and kind of translate that to like a huge woodlouse, but there's a weirdness and an abstractness that Miyazaki infuses into some of his films that almost feels inspired by this. I'd really like to know if Miyazaki has seen this, if he likes it, and in fact, this is like really spur of the moment, and I'm not sure I'll be able to pull this off without kind of derailing the video, and I'm moving away from the microphone. But I actually have a book here. It is Hayao Miyazaki, Starting Point, a collection of interviews. I wonder if he has any comments, because I'm sure there's a section where he talks about films that he likes or has been inspired by. And I somehow, for some reason, my memory is telling me he might have talked about this film in this book somewhere. Let me see. And I'm just kind of I'm really stalling now to see if I can find it. Perhaps I was just completely off on another Thoughts on Fantastic Planet, page 120. So let's just have a look. And maybe my memory is just like going back to this, and that's why I'm thinking about Miyazaki. Okay, Thoughts on Fantastic Planet by Hayao Miyazaki from film 124, number 31, April 1st, 1981, To whom it may concern, thank you for inviting me to watching the screening of Fantastic Planet. I've had so much pent-up frustration since seeing the film that it's been hard for me to put pen to paper. I've finally been able to organise my thoughts, however, and now realise that my frustration is not due to the film itself, but due to the work that I and those around me have been doing. It's all about an absence of art. I'm not saying this because there aren't enough talented art designers, it's something I've particularly been sensing about myself as of late. I don't dislike popular literature or films created for the masses, but I have this feeling that we've just been producing works according to an established formula. Even when I'm trying to be creative, I fear that I'm being overly influenced by the cheap, spiritually feeble, third-rate quality of the last 30 years of post-war Japanese popular culture. Artistically speaking, both Heidi and Julie the Wild Rose are of the same quality, but there may be a slight variation in the level of skill or workmanship, but that's all. Regarding Fantastic Planet itself, I found it interesting, but it was not a film I particularly liked. On a technical level, it was amazing, but the work itself didn't resonate with me. I'm glad I saw the film, but I doubt I would want to see it again. It's well made, but I also felt that its story is crude. I felt the creators started with Roland Topor's world and then looked around for an original story that would allow them to develop his world. I hardly think that the main theme of the story is a success, but the film clearly does succeed in bringing director Roland Topor's world to life. So that's really interesting. So he didn't actually like it. And I don't know if I have actually read. He goes on and on about this and talking about being an animator and so on and so forth. But that's interesting. So technically, he really liked it, and the rest of it doesn't really relate to the film itself. So that was just a complete side tangent. So I know if the technical level of it he thought was amazing, perhaps it is something that visual kind of, some of the visual ideas of the film is something he might have taken inspiration from, but not the story. And I would agree that I think Miyazaki's storytelling is so much more refined and, to me, effective than in a film like La Planète Sauvage. But all the same, I do get something out of this story. And while I agree that the story is crude, I do think that it works within the framework of what this actual film is, which is something altogether different from a film that Miyazaki might make in terms of the directness and the clarity of the storytelling. So I think that you don't always need to be one thing or the other, and in this case, being the other works just fine. So that's my thoughts on La Planète Sauvage and a random spur of the moment reading from that Hayao Miyazaki book. I'll see you in the next one, 6.5, where I'll be discussing the rest of the special features on this Blu-ray and the 5 short films from Lalou's career as presented in the special features. Thank you for watching. If you've seen the film, please leave your thoughts down below. I'd love to hear them. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
He's alright by me. Apart from the fact he throws cans of Carlin into a tree. Yeah, he's really cool. Yeah, he's really cool. But he's not quite as cool as you.